Good morning, and welcome to our session on hydrogen this morning. We're happy to have you. I can't see my video right now, so I'm not sure if everyone else can see my video, but I'm sure you can see the slides. So today we're going to be going over hydrogen's role in the low carbon transition. So my name is Mike Thiessen. I'm the Director of Sustainable Investments at Genis. I'm also a partner at Genis. And today we are really lucky to have Reid talk to us about hydrogen. So Chris is the CEO of Econa Power. He's also the Managing Director of IBET. So IBET is the Innovative Breakthrough Energy Technologies. And at Econa Power, what he is doing is they are creating solutions to create industrial scale hydrogen that's both low cost and clean. So it's going to be really exciting to talk to him today. But before we move on to that, I'm going to just go over a few housekeeping items. So first of all, if you could maximize your screen, that would lead to the best viewing experience for you for this presentation. So that would be great. Also, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A session for Chris after his presentation. So if you have any questions, we'll try and get to as many as we can. If we can't get to them in this presentation, then we'll try and get to them afterwards. And then also, if you are having any technical trouble, as I was having earlier on within this presentation, please write in the chat, and we have someone on standby that's going to try and help you through any technical issues. Often the solution can be to get out of the webinar and then log back in. That can often solve video problems, audio problems. So give that a shot as well. So we also want to start by having a land acknowledgement. So we'd like to start by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all lands that we're on today. While we meet today in a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of this land, which we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home and that have taken care of this land. So we're grateful to have the opportunity to meet and to work in this territory. Chris, if you don't mind muting, I think there's some feedback whenever I'm talking. Thanks, Chris. So hydrogen has been a very hot topic, as we all know, especially for the past 2 years and really hot in the past year. And I think a big part of that is just the advancement in technology, and then a lot of people realizing the importance of having this low carbon transition. A big obstacle for hydrogen in the past has been cost. So it's been both the financial cost of hydrogen and then also the environmental cost of hydrogen has also been a big issue in production. And so with technology and with carbon capture systems, financial costs have come down, and then also environmental costs have come down as well. Carbon emissions have come down in production. So before we move on to a few different terms that we're going to go over, we have an initial poll for everybody. If you go to the top right of the software, I believe a poll will come up. There we go. So what is your level of knowledge of hydrogen and what the hydrogen colors, production colors, and what they represent? It'd be great if you could let us know your thoughts there, and we can kind of gauge people's knowledge levels. Great, so we have about 60 answers so far. It looks like about half of the people haven't heard of any hydrogen colors before. So this is good. This is going to be a good educational session for a lot of people. 17% say some, I know of the colors, but not what they mean. And then 32% say, hi, I know the colors and what they represent. Great, so thank you for participating in that poll. I'm going to go over the colors right now just because they will come up probably within our conversation, within Chris's presentation as well. So these colors are representing different types of hydrogen production. So first we have brown hydrogen. So brown hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced from coal, biomass, and petrochemicals through water and heat to undergo gasification. And then hydrogen is distilled from a mixture of gases. And then we have gray hydrogen, which is produced in the same way, but produced from natural gas. And then we have blue hydrogen and green hydrogen, which we'll focus mostly on today, specifically blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is produced from hydrocarbons, but incorporates carbon capture in order to eliminate a lot of the carbon emissions or all of the carbon emissions from the process. And then we have green hydrogen, and green hydrogen is produced from renewable power through electrolysis. So those are the main categories of hydrogen production. And some other terms that we just want to go over is carbon capture storage or carbon capture utilization and storage, so CCUS. A term like that might come up as well. Another term I want to just bring up because it may come up as well is steam methane reformer, so SMR. So this is a process involving methane and other hydrocarbons reacting with steam in the pressure of a catalyst to form carbon oxides and hydrogen. So those are just some key terms, just so that we're all on the same page when we're going through this presentation and there's not too many questions about different acronyms that are going to be used. So we're really excited about learning more about hydrogen for when it comes to sustainability, because there are a lot of great future uses, some possibilities. So hydrogen powered vehicles, which Chris will get into, that is an area that's heavily debated by a lot of people as to the use of hydrogen powered cars. And then long range transportation and power generation, and the fact that a lot of the energy infrastructure that we use right now could be reused with hydrogen. So it's really exciting now. So we are very excited for your presentation, Chris, and I will hand it over to you.
That's great. Thanks. Looking forward to talking to everybody about this. I'm just going to set my timer here so that we don't I don't get out of hand. So very interesting to be here to talk to you today. I'm going to start by saying, I know you just had a poll, Michael, on the colors, but what I'd ask everybody to do is just forget about colors. Colors measure basically carbon intensity to some degree, but they also have a lot of emotional context for a lot of people. And the way that we prefer to look at it is, let's just really look at the carbon intensity of the different hydrogen production methods and look at the cost associated with being able to displace the CO2 that the use of hydrogen would have. So we think that it's more productive when we talk about the level of carbon intensity associated with the different production methods of making hydrogen, rather than lumping them in various colors, because there is no technology that will have zero residual carbon. They all do. Everything that we do when we produce hydrogen is going to require some form of negative emissions in order to take it down to zero, regardless. So we find it's more productive to kind of not talk so much about colors, but I understand, how they get categorized and how it gets used. So that would be the first thing I'd say. And then the second thing I want to say, just before I get into this, is just to put this hydrogen a little bit more into context and what it means. So as everybody knows, many nations around the world have declared that they're going to try to get to net zero carbon by 2050. There are still people who talk about our ability to electrify our way there. It's not feasible, really, to do 100% electrification. We can't do it, even in this country. It's not something that's feasible. So chemical fuels are going to be around for a long time, and hydrogen is a key energy vector to decarbonize chemical fuels. And that's really the context under which we talk about hydrogen, is that, yeah, we can do renewables to the degree we can, and we can do, in this country, we're fortunate enough to have some nice baseload production of electrons through, through the various means that we have here, whether it's through hydro or nuclear, to be able to produce clean baseload electricity, but we can't electrify everything. So hydrogen is a way to decarbonize our chemical fuel systems. So let me start by talking about hydrogen markets in general. So, I've divided it into 3 categories. By the way, I've got a series of slides and they've got a lot of words on them. And I'm not going to read them to you. I'm just really going to use them to kind of draw an overall narrative for the hydrogen markets, what's happening, and how hydrogen is produced. And then I'll finish a little bit about what we're doing at Econa as well, because we think it's kind of interesting in terms of decarbonizing hydrogen. I don't pretend that this is exhaustive. I'm going to leave out a lot of things, but I'm just going to try to give you a general overview. So these major hydrogen markets, we look at industrial hydrogen. So in industrial hydrogen, that's where we produce ammonia and hydrogen peroxide, and we use industrial hydrogen for upgrading and refining for our hydrocarbons. And it's an established market that's been around for a long time. Hydrogen energy is an emerging market. So that's where we use hydrogen for mobility applications. We also use it for power applications. And then we have this one called natural gas decarbonization, and that's where we're looking to, natural gas is a difficult fuel to decarbonize, but it's a ubiquitous fuel and it's used everywhere, and we have these grids everywhere. So there's a lot of interest in how do we decarbonize that, through renewable natural gas and through hydrogen, and how do we decarbonize the world's large LNG, liquefied natural gas infrastructure. So I'm going to start with industrial hydrogen, just to let you know, it's a pretty big market already. There's lots of production. Hydrogen is kind of found everywhere. We produce it all the time, and we use it in a lot of industries. This just shows you a little bit about what it looks like in the United States, and how much hydrogen is produced per year. So as far as industrial hydrogen goes, again, you'll see the different types that you have, on purpose and merchant, and then what we call on-site production of hydrogen, which kind of either goes over the fence to the production facility, or they produce it themselves. This next slide is to just talk a little bit about the decarbonization network. So, this is a slide that shows you the natural gas pipelines throughout North America. As you can see, they're pretty extensive. They, of course, don't include all urban pipelines and everything that we have. You are all very familiar with it. I'm sure you either have natural gas fireplaces or natural gas appliances in your home. Natural gas is piped to everybody. Most of North America, most communities in North America. So decarbonizing this is an interesting exercise that hydrogen is a prime candidate to tackle. This just shows you a little bit in the pipelines that I showed you on the previous slide. There's only so much hydrogen you can put into the pipeline before you run into something called hydrogen embrittlement. And not all pipelines, of course, are subject to it. But if the pipeline is made of carbon steel, then indeed it is. So, there's blending. There's a lot of studies going on, like how much hydrogen can we blend with the natural gas pipeline, and to what degree can we blend it before we actually have to replace the pipelines themselves. So, if you imagine a future where hydrogen is being produced and it's being put into the grid, into the natural gas grid. You show the next slide, I think shows that. You have the centralized hydrogen production plant. It's taking natural gas, or it's using electrolysis, for example. It's making hydrogen, and that hydrogen is going into the grid, and it's being blended, and then it's being sent through the grid to, our industries and our commercial and residential markets. Up to a certain amount. There's lots of studies going on. For example, Fortis has done a lot of studies on determining what is that end use impact. So, at the burner, if you add more hydrogen, what's the impact? Are there any changes that really need to be made to our plants? And what percentage of the blend in the pipeline do we have to get to before we have to make those changes? So I think, if you wanted to see it from a big picture point of view, we would make hydrogen, we would put it into the grid, and then eventually what would happen is we would be replacing the grids with hydrogen pipelines, and hydrogen would be produced in centralized places. It would be fed out into the grid, much like we do natural gas, and then we would be converting our natural gas grid into a clean hydrogen grid. This is obviously a big topic, and I'll come back to this. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions about it as well. And there's a comparison here about how hydrogen will emerge when you compare it to how electricity is. And maybe I'll just very quickly touch on that. So electrical production uses our base load, what we call dispatchable. That means it's available 24/7. We use our lowest cost feedstock. So we use natural gas and we use coal, for example. And then we have these feed-in tariffs where we produce electricity from renewables. Hydrogen will probably go very similar to that. We'll create this base load hydrogen, this 24/7 dispatchable hydrogen, and that will likely come from hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons are the cheapest source of hydrogen. We don't have to burn it. We can process the hydrocarbons differently. We can extract the hydrogen out, and we put the hydrogen into the grid, like something like Michael said with SMR, but there are other ways to do it too. So we'll have this big baseload hydrogen production that will go into the grid, and then we'll likely have electrolyzers and electrolyzer farms, which will use low-cost intermittent renewables, and then that will get fed in on top, kind of like it does with electrons, but only with hydrogen production going forward. So that's one vision you can think about how this all converts. Let me switch over to something that people talk a little bit about, the mobility space. So the very first place that's in mobility that's pulled on hydrogen is something called the material handling marketplace, and these are huge indoor lift truck fleets that are at very large distribution centers, and they operate 100 to 300 trucks. They operate 24/7, and it's all about how many pallets you can move per hour. So it comes from the manufacturer, it comes to these distribution sites. These pallets are stored, goods are stored, and then they're put on trucks and they're shipped off to, say, Walmart distribution centers or Costco distribution centers or Amazon stores, I should say. So there's these huge kind of mini cities contained inside these large distribution centers. And it turns out that hydrogen and fuel cells can increase the productivity of these facilities. In other words, that you can move more pallets per hour if you use hydrogen and fuel cells instead of using batteries and chargers. So there's been a market for that. There's a value proposition and an internal rate of return, and customers are buying it now. And it's the largest market for fuel cells. There's probably 30 to 40,000 fuel cells in this space right now. And the company that dominates it is a company called Plug Power. And Plug Power uses more liquid hydrogen than any other industry in the United States today, including NASA. Just gives you an idea of what these look like. So these are fuel cell units that are powered by hydrogen that are powering these different classes of indoor lift trucks. Just gives you an idea how the infrastructure works. So the cheapest way to get hydrogen to these particular fleets, and will likely be the cheapest way, and is the cheapest way to get it to our vehicle fleets right now, is you use an SMR to produce the hydrogen. So you take natural gas, you have a steam methane reformer, it produces hydrogen, and then the hydrogen goes into a liquefier, it gets liquefied, and it goes into a tanker truck, and then the tanker truck delivers it to site, and it's stored, for example, you see the liquid hydrogen storage tank there. Then it's vaporized and put into the trucks. And that's how we fuel. That's the cheapest way to fuel our cars as well as they convert over to hydrogen. This just shows you that there's deployment in this market, and it's happening. This is actually dated. It's quite a bit more now in 2021. Let me talk a little bit about fuel cell electric vehicles. The first thing I want to say is that a fuel cell is an electric vehicle. What happens is you put the hydrogen on board the vehicle, and then the hydrogen is used to fuel a fuel cell. And the fuel cell takes oxygen from the air and it takes hydrogen from the storage tank, and it actually generates power right on board your vehicle. So you really have a vehicle power plant, electrical power plant, right under your hood. And the advantage of that, of course, is that you can pull up to a fueling station, you can fuel it just like you would a gasoline vehicle, although it's you're filling it with pressurized gas. And it takes you 4 or 5 minutes, and you can get 600 kilometers range. And now you have a car that drives like a Tesla because it's an electric vehicle. So you don't have to go through any of the charging. You don't have to worry about range anxiety. But we do have to worry about getting hydrogen fueling stations, of course. But they're building up, and you'll see why. So if you had to roll it out, this is a busy slide. Let me just give you the punchline. Basically, the vehicle market is continuing to evolve. I would say that battery electric vehicles, pure battery electric vehicles, are probably going to dominate the light-duty vehicle class. When you get into a medium, so probably 80-20, that kind of thing, we will see fuel cells, but most of it will be battery electric. When you get into medium duty, it probably splits more evenly. And then when you get into heavy duty vehicles, where the payloads are heavier and the energy required is a lot more, that's where a fuel cell electric vehicle will dominate over the battery electric vehicles. And sure enough, companies are starting to go that way. This just shows you that, yes, there are commercial electric vehicles out there. And I would point out that I actually drive that last one, which is a Hyundai Nexo. And it's a fabulous car. And here in Vancouver, we have 4 refueling stations in the city. And we actually have one in Victoria already, and more are being built. And I pull my car up at any of the commercial fueling stations that offer hydrogen. And it takes me 5 minutes, and I get 600 kilometers range, and I'm good to go. These fuel cell vehicles in the truck class, we're starting to see them come on. Hyundai and others are leading, including and Caterpillar for the large vehicles, have a fuel cell and hydrogen strategy to convert mining vehicles and other large, very large industrial vehicles over to hydrogen too. Buses, of course, are kind of split between electric buses and fuel cell electric vehicles, and we're seeing both these technologies vie within the municipal bus fleets. This just shows you a little bit about how does this really work? How do we get the hydrogen to the customers? So there's a compressed hydrogen delivery you see in the top, and then a liquid hydrogen delivery you see in the bottom. And basically, it differentiates at about 100 kilograms a day for hydrogen and under. It's probably more cost competitive to use compressed, and as you get over the 100, you would switch over to liquid. And to just give you an idea of how much that is, when you fuel up your vehicle, an average fuel up is probably going to be somewhere like 3 to 4 kilograms of hydrogen would be an average fill up. If I filled my car, if it were completely empty and I filled it all the way up, it would be 6 kilograms. So if you think of a kilogram of hydrogen for 100 kilometers, that's pretty close. Lots of stations coming online in a lot of different countries. This shows you what's going on in California. It's one of the leaders in this space, and there's lots of hydrogen vehicles, passenger vehicles that are operating throughout the state of California. I think you can drive just about anywhere and be able to refuel with hydrogen. This is what's going on in Europe. Europe is mostly, Germany has been the largest number of refueling stations, and they have a strong hydrogen economy that they're trying to build up there. Japan is another area where they're doing this, and of course, some of these vehicles are coming out of Toyota, and they build up. They had some targets for the Olympics. I'm not quite sure what they are. I'm not sure the slide says that, but Japan has as a national objective to be able to convert over to a hydrogen economy for their chemical fuels, and South Korea is the same way. And of course, the Hyundai Nexo, there's thousands of them operating in Korea right now. This just shows you what's going on in BC at this point in time. These are the stations, the planned future stations. This is older. Some of those planned future stations are there. I think just about all of them are there except for the UBC one, which is just announced. So I'm sorry, the one in Kelowna is not built yet either. But you can see we're starting to roll it out ourselves. And these hydrogen fueling stations are located at, if anybody's driving from Vancouver and you're driving down Granville Street on your way to the Arthur Lang Bridge, and when you get to 70th Avenue, if you look at the Shell station, you'll see gasoline, diesel, and hydrogen on their board. So it's starting to become more mainstream for sure. So that's just, there's the industrial markets. We talked a little bit about the natural gas decarbonization markets. And I spent some time talking about the mobility markets because it kind of connects everybody to it because everybody understands cars. But really the industrial markets and the natural gas decarbonization markets will be the largest. That will be, that'll be driving the economies of scale for sure. So now let's take a look quickly at a quick overview of the production methods. So this is how it's produced today. It's mostly a natural gas to SMR, but there is gasification processes that take place as well. And you see electrolysis as a small part of the market, the current market. Steam methane reforming, as Michael mentioned, it's a method where you take natural gas and you take steam, and I won't go into the details, but basically you produce hydrogen and CO2 out of it, and there's some numbers underneath it for what the energy requirement is, and a little bit for those of you who had some chemistry and are interested. You can see the reaction. So there's a reforming reaction and then a water gas shift reaction. And essentially you get CO2 and hydrogen. It's a great method. It's fairly low cost way. It is easily the lowest cost way of producing hydrogen in the world today, but it does produce a lot of CO2. It produces about, for every ton of hydrogen you make, you produce about 10 tons of CO2. So it's fairly CO2 intensive. Electrolysis, of course, is not much less CO2 intensive. But much more expensive. And it has to do with that equation that's right in front of you, that 39 kilowatt hours per kilogram. That is the thermodynamic requirements for the energy to break down a water molecule. So, the challenge with this is, if you want to create dispatchable hydrogen like an SMR can, and again, to remind everybody, dispatchable means it's available 24/7, which industry, of course, needs. It gets very expensive in your OPEX. So at 39 kilowatt hours per kilogram, when you let's even take a very highly advanced efficiency of the device, that puts you at about 50 kilowatt hours per kilogram. So you can imagine that, if you had clean dispatchable electrons at 6 cents a kilowatt hour, you're already at $3 a kilogram per hydrogen. Whereas if I go back to this, an SMR produces it for about $1 to $1.20. So, I'm at $3 and I haven't added any capex yet. So electrolyzers are expensive and unless you can get dispatchable clean electrons for very low cost, like maybe in parts of Quebec, for example, it'll be more that feed-in tariff hydrogen production, I think, where you have these electrolyzer farms which take advantage of these low-cost renewables, and then it can feed it into the grid. And maybe you'll see some on-site with this as well. All of these technologies are important, but we all, in the exuberance that we have about, trying to reach zero net carbon, we often forget the economics. We forget, the customer pull for these things. We always have to remember that. This just gives you an idea. I was talking about electrolysis. So if you look at this dispatchable renewable power cost, this gives you an idea. I think the lowest I've seen to be able to take all our renewable resources and then pull it all together with high voltage lines and energy storage. A group in the UK did an analysis, and they came up with 60 pounds per megawatt hour, which is like 6 pence. What did that be? About 8-9 cents a kilowatt hour. The Australians, there's been a bunch of studies out of Australia as well, 9-10 Australian cents per kilowatt hour. So, just an expensive way to make hydrogen, make dispatchable hydrogen. So these clean, what we really want to get is, the incumbent is producing hydrogen at about 20. When you add the CCS to it, in other words, you take the CO2 and you put it in the ground, that drives it up to about $2, and then electrolysis, of course, is more expensive than that. So I'm just going to talk very quickly about what's going on. There are technology development that's taking place to try to reduce these costs, right? The incumbents at $2 trying to be less than that, and certainly to be less if we can than electrolysis. We have this thing that we've developed in Econa. It's called pulse methane pyrolysis. Pyrolysis as a technology grouping is really interested because what happens in pyrolysis is we take natural gas and we just, for those of you who remember or forgot, natural gas is CH4, so one carbon atom with 4 hydrogen atoms. And in pyrolysis, what happens is you break that molecule apart without adding any oxygen to it. So you thermally dissociate it, and the carbon comes out as a solid now. So you haven't created any CO2, and the hydrogen goes off to the customer. So now we have a solid carbon, which we can landfill, or in fact, there are markets that would be interested in this solid carbon, which could further offset the cost structure the hydrogen that you make. And I think, this just gives you an idea of what this can look like. So this is just a rendering of our particular version of a pyrolysis device. So natural gas comes in, it produces hydrogen and solid carbon. The hydrogen goes into all of those markets that we just talked about, and the solid carbon can go into a variety of other markets that could pull on this, that would be large, including power production, as long as you were back on a CCS infrastructure. So the possibility of being able to drive those costs down for clean hydrogen are there. With nominal costs of the price of the carbon, you can get the cost of clean hydrogen down to about $1 a kilogram, which is less than the incumbent SMR system that produces hydrogen already at about $1.20. So there's lots of promise and new technologies that are emerging to be able to tackle the cost issue. I would remind everybody that even at $1 or $1.20 a kilogram for hydrogen, that's we're talking about $10 a gigajoule or more. And when we compare that with natural gas costs, which are like $3 to $5 a gigajoule, we're still almost double as expensive as natural gas. But it's closer, right? It's much closer. If we use electrolytic electrolysis hydrogen, those costs go up to $20 and $30 a gigajoule compared to this $3 to $5 a gigajoule. So the objective is to close that gap as much as we can, and the more we close that gap, the faster the uptake and the more promise that we'll have to be able to deliver low-cost hydrogen to the customers. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. That was great. Very, very insightful, and in many ways very inspiring as well, just hearing about the possibilities. I think we have a poll before we get into some questions. But I think as we're doing that poll, if one person was asking how much it actually costs to fill up your hydrogen-powered vehicle.
Yeah, it's about, if I'm close to empty, it's about $60. So I think it's $12.75 a kilogram.
Okay.
So, and you get 100 kilometers per kilogram. So it's it was actually cheaper than my gas car.
Okay. So $12.65 per kilogram. Okay. So the poll question here is: would you consider driving a hydrogen-powered vehicle? So if everyone wants to answer there. So it looks like we have 28 answers. So it looks like 18% has said no, not for me. We have 32% saying maybe if there was more infrastructure in place, and then about 50% saying yes, I would. So quite a good positive response there. That's great. Very interesting. So we have a bunch of questions. We're going to try and get through as many as we can here. So one of the questions, just to start off, Chris, is about safety. So especially when it comes to vehicles, are there any safety issues when it comes to hydrogen, having hydrogen in your vehicle?
Right back on. Yeah. So hydrogen. I've been facing that Hindenburg question for a long time. By the way, I'm not sure it's the hydrogen, it's the diesel in the genset, I think, that caused most of the problems, or the rocket propellant that they painted on the Hindenburg. We won't go into that. But hydrogen is very, very safe because it's very, very light, right? And it's so if there are an accident, you have control to release the hydrogen to calm. Gas and propane and others accumulate underneath and become much more of a hazard. Hydrogen burns invisibly, so there are things like that. But if you're in a vehicle and you're in an accident, the hydrogen's going to be long gone. These tanks are engineered in such a way that you don't get these explosive events that you have from it. In fact, I would even go far to say that if we were building an energy transportation system today, that diesel and gasoline would probably never get off the ground, and it would be fuels like this that would be much preferred over those.
That's a lot of what concerns are out there with the questions right now. Other questions are regarding your PMP process. What is the greenhouse gas intensity of that process versus other production pathways?
About we're less than 1 kilogram of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen we make, compared to an SMR, which is about 10. So we're about 90% decarbonized over the SMR. Electrolysis would be even less than that. But there are ways in which you can operate a pyrolysis system to get it down to zero. You could use the hydrogen that you produce, and you could feed it back in and use that as the energy to provide the pyrolysis if you wanted to do that. You could also use renewable gas or biogas, to provide the energy, which would take it down to zero as well. So, it really comes down to economics. Now you've got this, this carbon, this residual carbon, there's not really a lot left there. Well, how much are you willing to pay to get rid of that very last little bit? There are a lot cheaper ways to do it, like I just mentioned, or, you could go to a company like Carbon Engineering and pay them $150 a ton to do negative emissions in order to take it down to zero. So I think it's important that everybody understand that even with electrolysis, you don't get down to zero, right? There's still 5 to 10 grams per megajoule of CO2 that you have. So we need to embrace not just clean fuels, but we need to embrace negative emission technologies if we want a snowball's chance in hell of reaching our net zero targets.
Headwinds for hydrogen in the next 5 years. I could see that could be one of the headwinds. Do you mind muting your mic just for a second, Chris?
Oh, I always forget.
Yeah, sorry. There's a lot of feedback. So headwinds in the next 5 years. One of them could be, getting rid of that last 10% or figuring out ways to do carbon offsets to get rid of that last 10%. But what are other headwinds that you're seeing for hydrogen in the next 5 years?
It's mostly around the cost, right? What I've talked about in the presentation. Being able to get hydrogen, to the application is also, not as easy as using our regular liquid fuels. So our regular fuels are liquid at ambient conditions. Hydrogen, you need to cool it down to 20 Kelvin, which is minus 253 degrees Celsius, right? So it needs to be very cold to turn into a liquid to carry it around. But I think the grid, the natural gas grid, provides a distribution network that we'll use to be able to move hydrogen around, even as a blend. And certainly as we go forward as a hydrogen carrier mechanism. So the cost is an issue. Being able to get it. For example, where I fuel up my vehicle, it comes in large compressed cylinders, and it gets stored on site, and then I connect it to my car and it fuels up there. But those, there's some infrastructure issues that we have to contend with to make that happen. But I think the grid is a natural way for us to, by 2050, if we've got, if our natural gas grid has become a hydrogen grid, I think that'll make a lot of sense.
Fuel cells. One of the questions being, if you were to have one right now, is most of the hydrogen fuel that you're putting into the cell, is that coming from the carbon intensive production process right now? I would guess in the future it's going to shift, but is it coming from more carbon intensive areas right now?
Part of that, I'm gonna have to hide the chat because I'm reading the questions while you're talking to me. Can you just repeat that for me?
Yeah. So the question is, if you're refilling your car right now with hydrogen, is that from more carbon intensive methods of production right now?
I think I Colin Armstrong, who runs HTEC, be the guy to answer that. But certainly, if it's done via electrolysis from the electrical grid here in BC, it'll be pretty low carbon intensity. And I think unless they're getting it shipped in from elsewhere, if they're actually doing it here, it'll be low carbon intensity And I was just going to respond as well. I see a question around why are we talking about cars, and everybody thinks it's going to be in for heavy duty. And I would just answer that I think that's what I had said, that for the passenger vehicles, it's going to be dominated by battery electric vehicles, and fuel cells are going to find more of their niche as you go into the heavy duty vehicles. So I just want to clear that up. I happen to have one. I like it because it takes away any of the charging infrastructure. I live in Kitsilano, right, in a building, and getting the charging and everything is a royal pain in the ass for me. So I really like the hydrogen. I love how the car works, and people will buy it, but battery electric vehicles will dominate the light duty vehicle market. I just want to make sure that people understand that I'm not advocating that hydrogen is going to take over the passenger vehicle market.
Yeah, I think that's good to clarify. I think that's one of the most popular questions that we actually got before this session was about will hydrogen replace kind of traditional electric vehicles. So yeah, that's great that you could clarify that. One of the other questions is, are there still significant technical challenges involved with PMP, or are they mainly solved with, and is there technology that just needs to scale it up?
If people are familiar with TRL levels, so technology readiness levels, they go from 0, where you just got an idea on a napkin, all the way up to 9, where you're commercial. And the PMP is about TRL 4, so it's been tested in the lab, and the IP's been validated. And where it's going right now is into we're building reactor cores to further show things like scale up, and show things like that it matches techno-economic projection. So that's where that is. It's in a classical energy technology venture company, right? And it's being promoted and moved along. And there are others. Ours is not the only one. There are other versions of pyrolysis. There are different ways you can do it, and some are commercial already today, and others have new ideas that I think are lower cost options that are going through these TRL levels. I would say that by 2030, pyrolysis will be another way to produce hydrogen alongside SMR and alongside of electrolysis. And those would probably, the 3 ways will probably be the major ways that we'll have from now until 2050 to fill out the hydrogen demand that emerges.
Of the economics of Econa, and I think you went over some of these in the presentation, but they're wondering what the split is between the hydrogen costs and auxiliary revenues that drive the overall costs.
About $1.30 to $1.40 per kilogram, so a little more expensive than the SMR without the CCS, but a lot less expensive than SMR plus the carbon sequestration, and that's with no value for the carbon. So if you start adding value for the carbon, right now the carbon is sold to as carbon black to tire and specialty plastic manufacturers, and it's quite expensive. They sell it for about $1,000 a ton. We don't think any of that's going to survive as we go forward, because the world's decarbonizing. There's going to be lots of carbon out there. So we think that that the market might gel around this product at about $100 a ton. And indeed, if you were to sell the carbon at $100 a ton, that cost of the hydrogen goes to under $1. So from about that $1.30, $1.40 down to about 95 cents to $1 if you sell the carbon. But we don't usually talk too much about that, because that's an emerging market. The world doesn't have low cost, finely divided elemental carbon that can be dispersed into a lot of different manufacturing processes right now. So it's unclear, where it'll stabilize at a price point, and where it'll, where industry will pull on it. But at $100 a ton, it pushes you under $1 per kilogram of the hydrogen, which is about, you're getting down to about $9 per gigajoule now, which is getting interesting, right? You're starting to get close to these natural gas costs. Well, relatively close. It's still a big gap, but you're getting relatively priced.
What do you think prices need to get to before it does become something that's more mainstream?
Well, I think that we're starting to hit mainstream right now at $2 a kilogram. So, Suncor's just announced that they're going to, they're building a huge hydrogen project with CCS. They're probably going to be around that $2 price point per kilogram. I think in California and in British Columbia, for as far as clean fuel standards go, the value of the carbon is like $200 a ton. Not the solid carbon, the CO2. So I think, the world is kind of going, well, it's going to be $2, right? That's what it's going to be. And it's starting to coalesce around that reality because that's how we can produce large scale dispatchable hydrogen. Unfortunately, that you need to be on a CCS infrastructure to do that. And where pyrolysis we think is quite interesting is that it can even be lower cost than that. And you have the flexibility of siting it anywhere on the grid, anywhere on the natural gas grid that you want. Because you don't need the CCS infrastructure because you're not making the CO2 anymore, you're making solid carbon.
That's really exciting. Another question is about the Canadian government and its backing of research and development of the hydrogen sector. Where are they with backing hydrogen? And do you think we're behind in Canada, or are we ahead of most other countries?
Canada is actually quite good in the early stage development. I've been impressed because part of when we're working on this, we basically started this whole company as a discussion with customers to really try to understand where they saw hydrogen strategically fitting into their operations and what price and what quality and where it needed, how it needed to be sited and all of that stuff that we would expect to have in a customer requirements document. And the BC government and the Alberta government and the federal government, because we've focused out in the West, they've been excellent. And our company has raised probably $10 million, over $10 million of non-dilutive funding from these sources, which is quite remarkable considering that that money was used to make a proof of concept device to get us to TRL4. Normally, that's very hard, right, when you're at that beginning stages. But as far as clean energy and technology goes, the federal government and the provinces, I think, are really kind of stepping up. We have the ICE fund here in BC. We have Emissions Reduction Alberta. In Alberta, we have something called the Natural Gas Innovation Fund, which is being very helpful too. We have NRCan, which has got together with the Canadian Breakthrough Energy group. They've been very effective. IRAP is a terrific program that we have in this country that helps people in the early stages. We got WD. So there's a lot of groups that are that Canada is pretty good. And then we have our shreds, right? We have our SR&ED tax credits, which really helps you when you're developing technology. So pretty good. As we get out and we get into the later TRL stages, and you're installing plants and you're actually building it out, I think there's been a lot of work to help support companies in that stage, and I can see a lot of things that are in the works to make that happen. We of course have SDTC, which helps out as we go forward. We haven't gone to them because we were too early. And then we have SIF, which is a group which is organizing other funding sources to help companies pull up into the demonstration phases. So we don't do bad. We don't do bad in Canada. And you know what? Are these people who are running these organizations are pretty bright. And so far, we've managed to stay away from trying to pick winners, right? And that's back to the colors, where this is about carbon intensity, right? Let's talk about carbon intensity and cost, because let's get the deepest carbon intensity for the lowest cost. And so far, there's been pretty good alignment around that. Every now and then you see people pushing that, hey, this all has to be green, it all has to be green. But so far there's been a recognition that it's not about green or blue, it's about reduction in carbon intensity at the lowest cost.
Carbon intensity. I think we have time for just one more question here, it's related to carbon intensity and renewables. So given the drop in renewable energy prices and the drop that they're expected to go, even further down in the future, do you think that green hydrogen or lower emissions hydrogen will become the cheapest source of hydrogen in the future, maybe 10 to 20 years from now?
I would say that some of these other technologies we're talking about are pretty low carbon intensity as well. But let's just talk about using renewable electrons to an electrolyzer. If somebody has a PPA for renewable electricity and say it's 2 cents or 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which is pretty low. At 3 cents, if you set up an electrolyzer on that, your OPEX is going to be $1.50, and you can give the CapEx away. So people say, oh well, this will all get produced in low cost countries, and the CapEx will come down. Doesn't matter, right? It's an OPEX. I take you back to 39 kilowatt hours per kilogram, which is really 50 kilowatt hours per kilogram when you factor in the efficiency. So in that case, you'd have that CapEx, or sorry, that OPEX, and now your CapEx has to be amortized on an intermittent flow, right? You don't have 24/7 electrons coming through, so your CapEx actually costs more, in a total cost of ownership, because it's an intermittent. You don't get to amortize it all the way around the clock. So, I could see you producing hydrogen at $2.50, out of something like that. And I could see, potentially where some renewable energy, they may dump their power at certain times because they have an excess of power and the grid can't take it. And, you could end up having free electrons, and you could have these electrolyzer farms, and it can produce very low cost hydrogen for short periods of time like that. So the way we see it is that electrolyzers and these larger baseload technologies like steam methane reforming and pyrolysis, they work together. They don't really compete so much. They're both necessary in order to give us a reliable supply of hydrogen from both baseload to what we would consider to be almost like a feed-in tariff. And these electrolyzer farms will use the grid, as a storage to put the hydrogen in at their low cost. So we would use it all. We're going to have to throw everything plus the kitchen sink at this problem. So, I don't think there's any winners to pick right now. And what I would also impress on people is that we have to be aware of the perfect being the enemy of the good here. We need to get on it right now, right? The last thing we want to get to 2050 is have this exponential curve where all the activity happens from 2045 to 2050. What we want to do is we want to maximize the area under that curve, because that's how we're going to get the biggest bang for reduction in GHGs. And the way to do that, the way to pull that the quickest, is to have the lowest cost solutions available as quickly as we can and work off existing infrastructure as quickly as we can. So it's a portfolio of technologies, and they all need to be brought to bear.
In order to make the transition to a lower carbon economy, and it's all about the carbon intensity, as you've been saying. Well, thanks, Chris. This has been really inspiring. I always get excited about this whenever we're able to chat. So thanks again so much for joining us today in this webinar, giving this presentation, answering so many of these questions. I know we have more questions that we couldn't get to. But if you have additional questions, send them to someone at Genis, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. For everyone that's viewing this, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. To our valued clients, thank you for attending. For people that are new to Genis, thanks also for attending. It's an honor to be able to put on these webinars and to try and educate, so that you can learn, so that we can learn, that we could be more sustainable investors and people. So I want to just talk about a webinar that we actually have coming up. So we have another webinar in a month from now. This webinar is the state of impact investing in Canada, how to become an impact investor. So this webinar is more for people that are just getting started in impact investing or are maybe considering impact investing. And we're going to have a panel format. So we're going to have Hillary Kilgore from Spring Activator. We're going to have Adam Spence from SVX, and then myself from Genes. And so this will be on June 17th at 10 a.m. And we would love if a lot of you could attend if this is of interest to you. So right after this webinar, you're going to be redirected to a survey. We would love to hear feedback on your thoughts of this webinar, what we could improve, what we're doing well that we should keep doing, because we want to continue to get better with these webinars. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.